Super creative.
As far back as I can remember, I wanted to be an astronaut. It didn't happen, but it's never too late to reach for the stars. Welcome to Robservatory, where we embark on adventures in space!
The moon and the planets are there.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Hi, I'm Rob Lyons, and you're watching Robservatory here on the Super Creative channel. Today we're doing a small, yet hopefully not insignificant upgrade to our astro imaging setup. We're going from ZWO 7nm narrowband filters down to Antlia 3nm narrowband filters in the hopes of squeezing every last photon out of our exposures. I live here, in this Bortle 8 to 9 zone. As you can see by the sheer amount of skyscrapers and surrounding city, astrophotography is a massive challenge from my location. So every advantage we can get, like switching to different filters or maybe even faster telescopes, these are the types of things we have to do in order to actually make images from places like this. In order to make today's upgrade happen, we've picked up a few things. I have the 8-position ZWO filter wheel. I'm currently using the 5-position EFW Mini, and I'm upgrading because I'm getting really sick of swapping the filters out. We don't have a lot of broadband we can shoot from a city like this, but I've challenged myself this year to do RGB stars for all my narrowband images. So I'm not going to be swapping filters in the filter wheel to make that happen, so we had to upgrade. Next up, we have the Antlia LRGB V5 Pro broadband filters. Interesting thing about this Antlia name, it's a constellation in the southern hemisphere, but it was too far south for the ancient Greeks to actually be able to see it, so it was named much more recently. And the original name was actually Antlia Pneumatica, which means air pump. So it doesn't have the legendary, grandiose stories of mythology that a lot of the other constellations do. So I found it a really interesting choice to name their astro gear company after, you know, a very strange constellation in the night sky. Next up, we have, of course, the 3nm filters, the star of the show. Really hopeful that these are going to provide a difference in our images. From the results that others have shown, it was very impactful. So, we're going to find out before the end of this video if that makes a difference. And finally, I have a darks filter, probably completely unnecessary. I'm using this as my 8th filter. I don't have anything picked out for that filter position. I don't know if I ever will. The gasket on my Red Cat's lens cap is like really wearing off and rubbing off, and there's a lot of gaps in it, so I'm somewhat worried there's light getting in there. I've been taping it when I shoot my darks with gaffer tape to make sure it's light tight. We're gonna throw this guy in there. Hopefully it does the job. Either way, it'll plug the hole and make sure no dust or light gets through. So let's take a very brief closer look at some of this gear. I know some of you guys probably want to see how it's packaged, how it comes, what comes with it. We'll get it installed up on the roof, in the Robservatory, on the telescope, and we have about 3 or 4 clear nights coming up, so we'll get to imaging right away. So let's do this. Antlia filters are packaged extremely well. Here inside the box we have a plastic wrapped filter, and inside that is an acrylic case. It's a transparent acrylic and it's held shut with magnets. Very interesting. Kind of a cool little filter case. A shame I'll probably never see it after today. It's going to go in a box, but yeah, nice little touch, really nice attention to detail. I love stuff like this. Inside that we have our sealed filter, and it's incredibly well packaged. 2 thumbs up to Antlia for the packaging. Everything came so well prepared. It inspires confidence in their product, a lot of attention to detail, and certainly feels a lot more premium than my ZWO set, which is very much a beginner entry level. I would consider this kind of an intermediate set, and hopefully one day in the future we'll be doing an Astrodon video here together and seeing how they stack up against these.
Level up!
Our new filters are installed, we're up here on the roof, we're ready to go, but of course, our new purchase has brought clouds. So here's a general idea of what I'm planning. We're going to go for IC 1396. That's the Elephant Trunk Nebula in the constellation Cepheus. I'm doing that because it's in a good part of the night sky to image this time of year, and I'm pretty sick of shooting North America, which is the only other thing that's really great right now. I'm going to do one filter per night, one narrowband filter per night. I'm also going to do a night of LRGB for stars. I've never done that before. It's a challenge for myself this year to do RGB stars for all my narrowband images. My second challenge is that I would really love to get a cover of an astronomy magazine. So we're going to switch up our composition. I've already shot this target before, so I'm going to shoot it vertically this time with an eye for graphic design. So Sky and Telescope, Astronomy, Sky News, you know, just saying, cover. If you're watching this, it means things have probably gone pretty well. Hopefully we got a night's worth of data out of each filter. If the weather holds out, I will shoot longer. I'd like to go 15, 20, maybe more hours depending on the weather, but you know, as you can tell, it has not been great lately. So fingers crossed, wish me luck, and let's let the little red cat do its thing. I should probably tell you what I'm using. We got the Red Cat 51 by William Optics. It's riding on the AZ GTI. If you haven't watched my video on that mount yet, you should check it out. Links in the description or the little card. We got the William Optics High Latitude Wedge, great upgrade for this, and we're running it through an ASI Air Pro to program everything. And that's about it. Nothing too fancy, but it really gets the job done. So yeah, please wish me luck, and we'll see you back at the computer to check out the data. All right, my friends, we're back. We got some data. I managed to capture not just one, but two images, and you can see them over my shoulder. But we're not going to talk about those just yet because I have to preface this segment with a disclaimer. I'm going to show some 3nm images and some older 7nm images, but this is very apples to oranges. I actually hate that expression, but it's very true in this situation. These images were shot different years, processed differently, you know, different seasons, like some were shot in fall, some were shot in summer, so we can't do a direct scientific comparison. I can't give you a hard number on what percentage of improvement you could expect by going to 3nm filters. What we can do is look at the images and get a sense of what types of improvements there are. We can analyze the images and decide for ourselves if it's worth the upgrade to 3nm or if they're too similar and, you know, we're just splitting hairs here. So let's get to the data. I am going to show you the raw stacks through each filter: hydrogen alpha, sulfur 2, oxygen 3. We're going to look at the stacks, we're going to look at the combine of the three, and then we'll look at the final processed image as well. I'll run all the subs, how much exposure time, all the good stuff. So up first, we are going to look at hydrogen alpha, and the target here is the Elephant Trunk Nebula, IC 1396. So this is 85 frames, 300-second exposures. That is 7 hours of exposure time here for hydrogen alpha. As you can see, we have some really nice data. I think this is probably some of the best hydrogen alpha data I've ever shot, although hydrogen alpha is typically pretty strong. Even here in this Bortle 8 to 9, hydrogen alpha is kind of the go-to filter. You can shoot it on a full moon and still get great data. So this is not going to be the deciding filter from this set on, you know, what we've gained here. We all know what filter that's going to be, but I think this is a strong showing here for the HA. Let's move on to Sulfur 2. Sulfur 2 isn't usually that strong. It's in the deep reds. I always find it very helpful to shoot as much Sulfur 2 as I can. I should probably shoot more. We see a decent amount here. It's not as much as I wished it was, but what can you do? I mean, I spent a lot of nights imaging this. This is 62 exposures, and about 5.25 hours, so 5.25 hours of exposure here on Sulfur 2. And I mean, I wish it were more, but what can you do? This was a lot of nights invested in this, and you have to move on at some point. Speaking of moving on, let's get to the star of the show, Oxygen 3. Now, as you may or may not know, Oxygen 3 emission line is still subject to light pollution. So whether it's the city lights or moonlight, it can ruin our exposures in Oxygen 3. So you typically want to shoot them around new moon when you can get the best contrast, the best signal to noise ratio in your image. So I think this is really going to be the deciding factor on our image, is how Oxygen 3 performs, and where we're probably going to see our biggest benefit, because S2 and HA, they do really well under light polluted skies. So under city light, I mean, they kill it. You don't need to even shoot a new moon. You can shoot during full moon as long as it's far enough away. You're still going to get great data. So this Oxygen 3 stack, I think it looks pretty good. I mean, Oxygen 3 in the elephant trunk is pretty sparse. It's very faint. You really have to dig deep to get the Oxygen 3 there. What we're looking at here is actually 12.25 hours. So the O3 stack is still looking pretty sparse. I already know that it's enough to make a good image, but it's hard. IC 1396, it's very diffuse there. It's not a strong Oxygen 3 nebula. You really have to expose a long time to pull that data out and get a strong signal, and I think we've done that here by going extra long with that filter. I think it paid off. Finally, I did some RGB. I did about 2 hours, and it was my first time doing RGB stars. I did 1 minute exposures. I know now that I should have gone shorter. So my bad, it's all live and learn. I mean, every time we go out and shoot astrophotography, I think we progress. We're always striving for better images. So next time I'm gonna shoot 30 seconds. Okay, so let's get on to the combination. This is the hydrogen alpha, the sulfur 2, the oxygen 3, all combined together into one beautiful image. And I think it looks pretty strong. It's a great starting point. I have some decent saturation. I've gone with the classic Hubble palette. I've really reduced my greens, pushed things towards the gold, reduced my magentas. I guess I'd call this a very mainstream looking Hubble palette deep sky image. And this is a grand total of 26.25 hours of exposure time through all of our filters here. Now, without further ado, here is the edited final image. This is with the RGB stars replaced. I will actually do a tutorial on that in the future because I found a much simpler way of doing that, and you don't need PixInsight. So look out for that one. I'll do it soon. But I think this final image turned out fantastic. I'm gonna just go out there and say this is my best deep sky image to date. I've done other images that I've done longer exposures on or spent more time editing, but I think the 3nm filters here are really shining. They definitely give me more contrast in the image. The little dust lanes are popping a little more. Some of the subtle ones have emerged. Let's go ahead and put the old 7nm image and 3nm image up on the screen at the same time right now. The 3nm aspect, that narrower band pass, I think has given me a nicer signal to noise ratio and higher contrast. As you know, when you increase contrast, it makes details appear sharper. So it definitely looks like a more detailed, sharper image to me. That's huge. And if we look at the Oxygen 3 data in particular, I mean, I was able to push it pretty hard and get those blues to really pop. And you saw that sparse stack earlier. There wasn't a ton of data there, but what was there held up. We had a much better signal to noise ratio than our previous stack. Let's go in on a crop of the elephant trunk. And I think you'll agree, I mean, this is the same scope, same camera, so it's the same field of view. And, you know, it's more detailed. And I didn't do any sharpening on this new image. All I did was some noise reduction, a little bit of clarity in Photoshop, and I didn't do any type of sharpening. I didn't run it through Sharpen AI or anything like that. Okay, so I think it's a huge improvement. It's not complete night and day, but it's enough of an improvement that I think the cost was worth it to upgrade over those entry-level ZWO 7 nanometers to go to the 3 nanometer, especially in Oxygen 3. And I want to talk a little bit more about that subject at the very end of this video, but before that, I want to quickly go over our second image here, and this is the Pelican and North America Nebulae. They're high up in Cygnus right now, a great time of year to shoot these targets in July, early August here. And I managed to put in quite a bit of time on this, which I think is probably overkill. Let's go to our HA data. So here, our hydrogen alpha stack, we all know hydrogen alpha is always going to be a strong signal. Here we're looking at 92 subs, 300 seconds long, that's 5 minutes apiece, for a total of 7.6 hours. Very strong outing for hydrogen alpha, but I mean, we expected that, right? Moving on to S2. S2, I went a little deeper this time. 113 exposures for a grand total of 9.5 hours of exposure time in S2. And not a lot of S2 there, but it should make a difference. It is a third of our image, in theory. So I think it was worth going the extra time. And speaking of extra time, I went crazy with the 03, and take a look at this. This is 163 5-minute subs, 300 seconds. A grand total of 13.6 hours of exposure. That extra time in 03 definitely paid off. Absolutely. This is exactly why I wanted 3 nanometer filters, especially in 03s, to get a strong signal to noise ratio like this. Here's the combined file. A great starting point, super strong oxygen signal. This is going to be a great Hubble image. Let's move right on to the final version. This is how I've wanted to make a North America and Pelican Nebula image for several years now, but haven't had enough 03 data to really make that happen. I also did RGB stars for this. It's a little over 2 hours of 30-second exposures to do that. So I'm super pleased with the results. A lot of exposure time and super clean image, very good contrast, amazing 03. I think I could have done better on the processing, the S2 and the HA. I mean, the gold color could be improved. I could deepen it. There could be some more nuance there. But in general, I'm super happy with how it turned out. We'll compare it to my old 7 nanometer image, but here's the thing. I did this as Hubble palette, and I did that one as HSO. Before I throw it up on the screen, I just want to say the reason why I did it as HSO, the old image, is because I didn't have enough oxygen to get a good looking image. It just didn't look good, so I kept it in the more red palette, and it's kind of what I do when I can't get enough O3 and sulfur to really make a beautiful Hubble image. You can always go back to HSO and have that more kind of hydrogen alpha dominant image, and they're still super cool, but maybe not what you're going for. So I finally got what I wanted. Here they are side by side. And the interesting thing is I actually tried to process this new image as HSO instead of SHO. And what happened was that it was extremely purple, extremely blue. The hydrogen was completely overpowered by the oxygen, which is really a first for me. I've never had that happen before. So when I attempted it, I just couldn't get it to balance because it was so dominant, that Oxygen 3 data. So it made sense just to go pure Hubble palette, and I love it. It turned out fantastic. All right, I think I've probably gone on for long enough. Final thoughts on these Antlia 3 nanometer filters is they're excellent. I mean, I can't compare them to the high-end Chroma or Astrodons or the other budget-friendly Optolongs, but in my usage, I found them excellent, a huge improvement over my previous gear, so they're going to stay with me. These are keepers. In fact, I'm going to sell off the old stuff. I was going to save it to maybe build out a second rig, but after seeing 3 nanometer compared to 7, I can't go back to that, especially in the Oxygen 3. And that brings me to one tip that I want to share. If you're looking to get a bit of improvement out of your narrowband imaging if you're in the city like myself, or you want to shoot closer to the moon, or just get a little bit more signal to noise ratio, squeeze every photon out of your images, get the O3 3nm filter. That one filter is going to make the biggest improvement. That's where you see the most bang for your buck, and it's the most subject to light pollution from the moon or the city or whatever your case may be. So by swapping out that one filter, I think you'll see the biggest improvement overall. I bought the whole set, and it's quite a bit more money to do that. I also added in the LRGB, and I'll test those in the future on a broadband target, but for now I can tell you that the LRGB behaved parfocally for me. The narrowband looks parfocal, but I only shoot one filter per night, so I didn't really test that extensively. I shoot many evenings for each of my images, so one filter per night, I just leave that one filter and let it run. In the future, if I get to dark skies or when my f3.5 scope is up and running, maybe I'll use multiple filters per night, but I think I'll still probably stick with my program, which is one evening or 2 evenings even if I can through each narrowband filter. That's how I get the best results. Before I wrap things up, I actually got interrupted while I was recording this video by UPS. I want to show you something cool. This is a prototype of something I'm working on, and this is, let's see if I can get it into the light, a picture of the Heart Nebula, as you can tell, but it's printed onto brushed aluminum and then coated in a layer of epoxy. So I think that's pretty cool. It's got a metallic sheen and almost anodized look to it. Really cool. Something I'm working on for the future. I'll let you know when that's ready to talk about a little bit more. Until then, the stars belong to everyone, so get out there and see for yourself. Robservatory is a subsidiary of the Super Creative Corporation. Super Creative. Woo!